Ponzi scammer Bernie Madoff and
Bernie Madoff, the Madoff scandal.
Bernie Madoff, the mastermind of the biggest Ponzi scheme in history.
Ponzi schemer Bernard Madoff.
Bernie Madoff, the man who orchestrated one of the largest financial swindles in history.
Bernard Madoff.
Bernard Madoff has just been sentenced for the biggest investment fraud in Wall Street history.
that Madoff committed crimes unprecedented in scope and magnitude.
So to repeat, Bernard Madoff has been sentenced to 150 years in prison and with no parole in the federal system. That, of course, needless to say, is a life sentence.
It was a cold December day in 2008 when detectives knocked on the door of Bernie Madoff's $7 million Manhattan penthouse. Having been informed his business operation was a fraud, they were looking for an innocent explanation. But there was no explanation to be had. $64 billion stolen. Retirement funds drained.
My life savings is gone.
Charitable organizations forced into bankruptcy. And even a few lives lost.
Bernie Madoff's son has been found dead in his Manhattan apartment.
A New York money manager who lost more than $1 billion in Bernard Madoff's alleged Ponzi scheme has apparently committed suicide.
How did this Wall Street bigwig fall from grace? Welcome to Fallen Stars, where we investigate the downfall of some of the most well-known figures in society. Let's rewind our story and start from the beginning. Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born on April 29, 1938, to Sylvia and Ralph Madoff. Better known as Bernie, he was raised in a modest home in Queens, New York. Although they weren't poor, his mother was very frugal, and Bernie resented her for that. He never got the latest clothing or shoes, and it's been said by his childhood friends that this is where his insatiable thirst for money began. But most kids don't grow up with the latest clothing. So is that really to blame? Or was scamming in his blood? A deep dive into his life shows a history of scams, starting with his parents. His father struggled with tax problems his entire life. Claiming to be a plumber by trade, no one actually saw him work as one. In 1963, a brokerage firm ran by him and his wife was shut down because they had failed to file reports of their financial condition. How his parents actually made a living is still in question. As Bernie grew up, he was anxious to start making money of his own. So while in college, he started his own business, essentially a cash grab. Bernie was installing lawn sprinkler systems fast and cheap. He used charm and manipulation to secure his customers, despite being unqualified for the job. His shoddy work quickly drove the business into the ground, but not before he had made a profit of about $5,000, equivalent to $50,000 today. It's been said that angry customers approached him in public for years after the business had gone under. One old friend recalling that there'd be times they would be out having dinner, and some guy would come over to Bernie and say, "You put in my sprinkler system 3 years ago, and I've been trying to find you. It needs to be fixed." But that didn't dissuade Bernie. With the money he made from his lawn sprinklers, Madoff's first foray into the financial world began. At just 22 years old, he created his first investment firm, specializing in penny stocks. These stocks were cheap, so they had caught the eye of the casual investor. A lot of the larger firms wouldn't bother with the small-time investors, but Madoff would. He took anyone's money. As buying and selling stocks became more popular, there was a push to move these trades to electronic automation. Struggling to compete with the giants of Wall Street, he saw the move to automated trading as his ticket to success. He and his brother Paul worked tirelessly until they had created the first computer trading software.
The whole concept of these new types of systems is to make it easier and more cost-effective for people to trade.
Eventually adopted by NASDAQ, this software laid the framework for how electronic trading is done today. With the new automated system, Madoff's firm flourished. Using the software, they were able to process more orders than ever before. and Bernie L. Madoff Investment Securities was born. Cash was coming in hand over fist. Madoff was making an estimated $100 million a year in legitimate business practices. His childhood dreams of wealth and excess had finally arrived, but his insatiable thirst for power and money could not be satisfied. With his newfound success, he quickly drew investors in. Looking for ways to grow his business even further, Bernie started an exclusive hedge fund for his close friends and family. This hedge fund started turning amazing profits. While a typical return of 7% on investment was considered good, Bernie claimed an incredible 15% annual return. And of course, as word spread of this, everyone wanted in. His reported great returns, on top of the illusion that only a limited amount of customers were accepted, drove him tons of new clients. His customer list grew and grew, people turning over their life savings to get a piece of the Madoff pie. Billions of dollars coming in that everyone thought was being expertly invested. Well, as we would all come to find out, that wasn't the case. In what we now know was the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, Bernie was taking all the money and depositing it directly into his personal Chase bank account. Similar to the more well-known pyramid scheme, Bernie's Ponzi scheme worked like this. Initially, when he got people to invest, he was using the money from his legitimate business to pad the hedge fund, making profits look better than they really were. Word of mouth about his great returns would bring him even more customers. And then, as his first investors looked to cash out, he would use money from new investors to pay them off. A Ponzi scheme can continue until one of two things happens. Either you can't recruit new investors, or too many investors look to cash out at the same time. So this claim of an ultra-exclusive opportunity was actually open to literally anyone who would give him money. Many victims unknowingly recommended close friends and family, causing them to lose their entire life savings. Overall, Madoff's scam was very simple. The most elaborate part of it were the falsified documents he drafted up for investors and auditors, showing trades that never existed. And even some of those were sloppy. He would claim trades to happen on weekends and federal holidays. One time, claiming to purchase 123 call options of P&G, but only 20 had been sold that day. A former employee testified to forging a bunch of documents during an audit and then placing stacks of the documents into a refrigerator to cool them off so that the auditor wouldn't know they had just been printed. Really though, if one piece of paper could sum up how obvious this whole scam was, it's Bernie's profit line. When you think of the stock market, what's the first thing you picture? For me, it's the classic up and down lines, red and green, showing money made and lost. I'm certain you wouldn't tell me that you just pictured this. A straight line, going at a 45-degree angle up. Bernie's business was booming, and everyone wanted to know how he did it. So how did it not raise any red flags? Well, it did. Investors would ask Madoff specifics about how he invested, but he had a don't ask, don't tell policy. Proprietary strategy, he would say. One former investor said that what Madoff told us was, if you invest with me, you must never tell anyone that you're invested with me. It's no one's business what goes on here. When he couldn't explain to my satisfaction how they were up or down on a particular month, I pulled the money out. Harry Margopoulos, a financial fraud investigator, claimed Madoff's return would be the same as an MLB hitter having a batting average of .960. The greatest batting average in history is only .366. His own firm had tasked him with deconstructing Madoff's trading strategies so that they could replicate his success.
It took me 5 minutes to know that it was a fraud. It took me another almost 4 hours of mathematical modeling to prove that it was a fraud.
Going over 14 years of Madoff's returns, he found around 30 red flags. Having only 4 months and 14 years showing a loss, Markopoulos said that in order for Madoff's trading strategy to be viable, he would have had to purchase more options on the Chicago Options Exchange than actually existed. Markopoulos was unable to find any traders on the exchange that even had any dealings with Madoff. He submitted reports to the SEC numerous times in 2000, 2001, and 2005 that he says weren't followed up on.
I gift wrapped and delivered the largest Ponzi scheme in history to them, and somehow they couldn't be bothered to conduct a thorough and proper investigation.
But there was probably some hesitancy for people to step forward. Markopoulos said he submitted reports anonymously and checked his car for bombs out of fear of retaliation. When asked why no other financial experts reported their concerns, Markopoulos replied,
Because people in glass houses don't throw stones.
While the SEC was warned numerous times, the reports were either ignored or not truly investigated. Madoff got away with this scam for so long he began to feel invincible, once smugly saying,
You know, in today's regulatory environment, it's virtually impossible to violate rules. And this is something that the public really doesn't understand. But it's impossible for you to for a violation to go undetected. Certainly not for a considerable period of time.
So even though many on Wall Street were onto him, he was able to continue defrauding thousands and using their money to fund his lavish lifestyle. $22 million in real estate, including a luxury apartment in Manhattan, a mansion in France, as well as one in Palm Springs, a beachfront getaway in the Hamptons, a $7 million yacht named Bull, $10 million in art and furniture, over $2 million in jewelry, and one of his estates had silverware, valued at $65,000. He and his family lived the life of a luxury and spared no expense. A review of his credit card statements showed a nearly $12,000 hotel bill for one night. Swindling people for decades with what looked like no end in sight. What was Madoff's ultimate downfall? Well, it was the Great Recession of 2008, the worst economic downturn in U.S. since the Great Depression.
In-depth coverage now on the growing financial crisis.
We're in an urgent situation for the financial security of every American. Congress must act.
No one had money to invest. The new customers he previously had a constant stream of dried up. Families were losing homes, businesses closing, and all these investors who had trusted him with their hard-earned money were asking for it back. Requests flooded in to withdraw money. Madoff needed around $7 billion to handle all the requests, but with less than $300 million in his bank account, he was scrambling. Madoff was aware his Ponzi scheme was about to be exposed, but he refused to give up. In another heartless act, he asked one of his oldest and closest friends, Carl Shapiro, for help. Telling the 95-year-old that he had a great investment, Madoff accepted $250 million from his dear friend 10 days before his arrest. This money wasn't enough to save him, and when it was clear it was over, Madoff immediately cashed out all the accounts of relatives and preferred investors. Bernie then went to his sons and told him he wanted to give out nearly $200 million in bonuses a few months early. Questioning their dad and why he would want to do this, Madoff confessed his crimes. After consulting with a family lawyer, his sons went to the SEC and reported their dad. Hoping there was some sort of innocent explanation, detectives went to his penthouse the next day. But Madoff told detectives that there was no innocent explanation, and he was arrested on December 11, 2008. Requirement of his bail stipulated that he must stay in his penthouse, was subjected to electronic monitoring, and all assets were frozen.
Madoff, what do you have to say for yourself? Pushing and shoving. That's what Bernard Madoff came home to after making a brief appearance in a Manhattan federal court Wednesday. Sir, how do you feel? Madoff now has a curfew and an ankle bracelet to monitor his every move.
In a violation of his bail, nearly sending him back to jail, his wife allegedly attempted to mail an estimated $1 million worth of jewelry to his family. March 10, 2009, he was formally charged with 11 federal crimes, including securities, wire, and mail fraud, money laundering, making false statements, perjury, theft from an employee benefit plan, and making false filings with the SEC. He faced a maximum potential sentence of 150 years.
Do you have any idea how long this has been going on?
It's a key question, and investigators have been in there for about a week. At this point, not sure they have any idea.
Prosecutors discovered, including fictional profits, he claimed, that Bernie had stolen approximately $65 billion, the largest Ponzi scheme in history at the time. 2 days later, Madoff took sole blame for the scheme and pled guilty to all counts. He was sentenced to the max term of 150 years. The presiding judge noted a lack of any letters from friends or family testifying to good deeds done by Madoff. Other well-known fraudsters had at least used some of their unscrupulous earnings to help others, but not Bernie.
The worst part about the mess Madoff left behind, groups that were helping the most got hurt the most. Philanthropic organizations have lost a staggering $2.5 billion so far. There's a reason why they became such easy prey. One, the charities gave Madoff credibility. After all, who would cheat a charity?
Further investigation revealed some of Madoff's close friends receiving returns as high as 950%, a number so clearly implausible that they were sued and forced to return billions of dollars.
A number of Bernard Madoff's relatives will be sued this week for almost $200 million. That's a word from Irving Picard. He is the court-appointed trustee who is hunting down assets from Madoff's Ponzi scheme.
Madoff's wife, once sailing on yachts and flying private jets to her numerous mansions, now lives with her former daughter-in-law after being sued for nearly $45 million. Although his sons and wife were never charged, most found it impossible they didn't know what was going on. His whole family had worked at the firm at some point. Both his sons held high positions in his office when the scandal broke. The scrutiny became too much for his oldest son, Mark, and on the second anniversary of his dad's arrest, he took his own life. Madoff left thousands of victims in his wake, forcing the closure of many charities and foundations, as well as stripping hardworking Americans of their retirements they saved their entire lives for.
We had beautiful homes, and when we sold the homes, we gave Madoff the profit. So everything that we worked for is down the drain.
Madoff spared no one. Bernie served 12 years of his sentence before passing away in prison on April 14, 2021, at the age of 82. As awful as this story is, you can find a little bit of comfort knowing that, as of December 2023, the Madoff Victim Fund announced 91% of the victims' money had been returned. An astonishing number, when most crimes like these have a return rate of just 5 to 30%.